and 70 mountaineers stepped over a living guy who needed big help at this moment, and they decided to keep on going to the summit.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. More than 2 weeks after Norwegian climber Kristin Harila's record-breaking triumph on the summit of K2, often called the world's most dangerous mountain, that was on July 27th, there's been such a huge backlash. She's shut down most of her personal website, leaving only a single page detailing a written statement about what happened on that fateful summit day on July 27th. It's clear she only wrote the statement 2 days ago. It was posted on August 10th, but it seems since she wrote it, all hell has broken loose. There's been basically a shitstorm. It's been all over the media. There are three reasons I want to deal with this. Firstly, the previous episode I did on this channel deals with the concept of one's personal fairy tale coming at the expense of another's nightmare. Well, this is illustrative of that. We're talking about a climber who's reaching for her, she's sort of about to have her hero moment. She's heading for the summit. She's about to break a record, and in doing so, she's got to step over a climber that is in distress, basically dying, and then he does die. And then what did is your heroic moment so heroic if on your way to doing that you don't really pay attention to someone, that is in front of you? And of course, there's the counter argument, is it your duty? Was it her duty? Was it the duty of anyone else? Was it the duty of everyone else? In any event, the second reason why I want to deal with this is, as many of you know, I wrote about the K2 disaster, which occurred in 2008, as part of a series of books covering the Everest disaster, right? Just being analogous to that. So I feel it's a field I do know something about. And then the third reason is, I think the idea of heroism as a concept, as part of our culture, is worth thinking and talking about. What does it mean to be a hero, male or female? Whoever you are, what does it mean to be a hero? How do we think of heroes today? And is what Kristin did heroic? Should she be celebrated as a hero? And I suppose you could say, if you come across someone who is ailing and you're making for the summit, should everyone turn around and go back down in honor and respect of that person's life? So anyway, I hope you're going to keep an open mind. I still haven't made up my mind about this. I can tell you as of right now, what we want to get to is Kristin's statement first, which is basically 5 Instagram slides of text, and then, if necessary, we'll take it from there. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you find this analysis worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So these are her words under the title, What Happened on K2 2707 2023, and that obviously was summit day. This is a difficult statement to write. As many people already know, Muhammad Hassan passed away on K2. He was only 27 years old, and he is leaving behind his wife, 3 young boys, and his mum. The reason why I have not yet commented on this earlier is for the respect of his family. I wanted to ask if it is okay to write about this, as what I'm sharing today is not just my story, but also the story of Gabriel, my cameraman on K2, who was also working for hours to try to save Muhammad. I've unfortunately not received an answer from Muhammad's family, but because of all of the misinformation and hatred that is now being spread, I feel that I have to make this statement about what happened up on K2 on the 27th of July 2023. I also feel angry at how many people have been blaming others for this tragic accident. This was no one's fault. You cannot comment when you do not understand the situation, and sending death threats is never okay. Lama, myself, and especially Gabriel did everything we could for him at the time. This happened at the most dangerous part of the deadliest mountain in the world, and you should remember that at 8,000 plus meters, your survival instincts impact the decisions you make. I'm also extremely disappointed at all of those who are sharing photos and videos of our son's dead body without consent, especially considering how fresh this whole situation is in everyone's mind. It is extremely insensitive and shows no respect for those close to our son and for our son himself. He was a person who was important to so many people, and he should not just be remembered as a person who passed on K2. And that is the first slide. Now, I do want to comment very briefly on this slide. First of all, just to say that she's right that the point where this happened is under the Great Sirach. And underneath this Great Sirach is a bottleneck. It's an area where the climbers are forced to kind of climb in single file in a very vertical fashion, and then they do a traverse. And this is where a lot of people die on K2 regardless. They die of ice falling on them, avalanches, and so on. So it's an area you really want to get through as fast as possible. You really, in a way, not running the gauntlet, but climbing the gauntlet when you're in this particular area. So this is where one particular climber, floundered, and basically it was an area where, it's perilous. You don't want to spend an extended period of time because it's so dangerous there. So that does make sense, and I agree with that. I must say what is a little problematic is that she says that she's writing this because of how people are blaming other people. In other words, she didn't unilaterally write the statement. It seems to be written as a result of backlash. Also, she didn't actually get permission from the family. She said she was waiting for information and then ultimately decided to write about it anyway. Now, you might say, damned if you do, damned if you don't, but the way I see it, probably this should have been mentioned, it should have been volunteered anyway. And maybe in the future, climbers can honor the sort of protocol is to make a note on their Instagrams that are all about glorifying themselves about another climber in distress. I don't particularly accept that whole thing about, if you weren't there, you don't know, or if you're not a mountaineer, you don't know. Many of us have read books. Many of us have climbed to some extent. Many of us have watch documentaries, and so I don't know whether you can say, but out, this has got nothing to do with you. I think it is something that we should think about. Should we be more humane to people in distress around us in a situation like this? Or do you just say we can all be psychopaths, we can all go for our hero moment, and it doesn't matter what we do on the way? And I think this backlash shows that it does matter. The fact that she's had to write like a 5-page statement means that it does matter. Anyway, let's go on to the second page. On the second page, she talks about the situation, like literally what happened there. And so this is quite important. She says, this is our recollection of the situation. Gabriel, Nima, Lama, and me started our summit push at around 8 p.m. on the 26th of July. Right, so they started climbing at night. We had good pace from the start, and we could see the fixing team in front of us before we reached the bottleneck. The bottleneck is a dangerous place to be. There's snow and ice hanging over you, and you are walking on an extremely narrow path on snow that can collapse below you at any time. We all need to walk extremely close to the mountain and go through this passage as fast as we can. Every minute you stay there increases the risk of accidents, not only for yourself, but for everyone above and below you. That's what I've just said. When you reached this place, the fixing team had left the bottleneck and we could not see them anymore as they were around the corner of the Surak. We saw 6 people in front of us. Muhammad Hassan was in another team and was number 2. Lama number 7, me number 8, and Gabriel number 9 in line. Now, I think that's also an important point to bear in mind, is that this person was from another team. So are you responsible for someone in another team? And you might say yes, but then you could also say, who is more responsible for that person, right? Anyway, she goes on to say, behind us were a lot of other Sherpas and climbers trying to summit K2 that day. Then at around 2:15, the accident happened. She's talking about 15 minutes past 2 in the morning, so just more than 2 hours past midnight on that 27th of July. She said, I did not see exactly what took place, but suddenly our son had fallen and was hanging on the rope between 2 ice anchors. He was attached to the same rope as all of us. It was pitch black and we could hear him to the left side of us, away from the path. We could also see that he was hanging about 5 meters down, but we did not know if he slipped and fell or if a bit of snow collapsed below him. At first, nobody moved, probably out of shock and fear. Then we realized that he was hanging upside down and was not able to climb up by himself. He must have fallen almost 5 meters and his harness was all the way down around his knees. In addition, he was not wearing a down suit and his stomach was exposed to snow, wind and low temperature, making it extremely dangerous. With Lama and Gabriel, we first tried to get the attention of number 1, Hassan's buddy, who was before him. However, it seemed he couldn't get to him either. Page 3. So the 3 of us set out to help him, along with number 3 in line, who tried also to pull him up, clipping around the 4 people in front of us. Lama put down an additional ice anchor. I attached myself to this one and to the fixed rope as Lama climbed over to Muhammad, who was still hanging upside down. He tried helping him there alone, but it was impossible for one man to turn him around. Then we made another plan. Lama climbed above and Gabriel went from below, as I stayed next to the ice anchor, since Lama was now only clipped to a rope to me. This way we managed to turn Hassan around. He did not have any oxygen mask, neither did he have a down suit. Now I can tell you, just those things are going to put him in harm's way. That is a very lethal situation to be in. His legs were twisted in an awkward position, most likely because of the way he fell. Gabriel gave Muhammad his oxygen and tried calming him while positioning him head up. Now, I think it's important to note here that he is obviously alive. I mean, if you need to calm him, he is still alive. She doesn't mention much about what he's doing or saying or how he's trying to breathe. Anyway, she goes on to say, Muhammad's friend, who was number 1 in line, came down to Lama to help us. We had also added a new rope to Gabriel so that we could fasten it to Hassan. As we were trying to move Hassan up closer to the path, an avalanche went off around the corner where the fixing team was. We got message that they had problems. At this stage, we decided to split up. Gabriel stayed with Hassan and his friend in the bottleneck. I think Gabriel was a photographer. Worried for the safety of the fixing team, Lama and myself went forward to see how we could help them. Lama, Gabriel, the friend and me spent 1.5 hours in the bottleneck trying to pull him up before the avalanche and distress call from the fixing team. So basically what we are getting from this is that she did assist Muhammad. She did assist him, and other people from her team did as well, and that they spent about an hour and a half trying to help him in this very perilous zone. And then they eventually gave up. They eventually stopped because of an avalanche in that area. In other words, they eventually felt this is really too dangerous for us. And, we've been fighting to try and help this guy, and we really haven't made much progress. Then the end of that page, she says, when we got in contact with the fixing team, we realized they were okay. In other words, I don't know, either the avalanche wasn't so bad or there wasn't an avalanche after all. Lama continued to the front and I stayed behind and asked the Sherpas if they were turning around. They said yes, and as we understood it, that they meant there was more help going to Hassan. We decided to continue forward as too many people in the bottleneck would make it more dangerous for a rescue. So what she's saying is it would be very difficult to go back the way they'd come with people that are still coming sort of forward. If you're trying to go past people, that are in that sort of line, that's actually quite difficult and dangerous as it is, compared to everyone moving in the same direction. Then she says, considering the amount of people that stayed behind and that had turned around, I believed Hassan would be getting all the help he could and that he would be able to get down. We did not fully understand the gravity of everything that happened until later. So she's saying that she misunderstood. She was under a certain impression. Then on the 4th page, we've got one page to go after this, she said, back in the bottleneck, Gabriel had managed to make a pulling system with 3 anchors and a rope, and Hassan's friend was helping Gabriel to pull Hassan up little by little. So they're obviously making gradual progress. The other thing is he's still alive. He's still functional to some extent. As they did, people were crossing them, trying to get away from the dangerous bottleneck that lies at 8,200 meters. So this is in the death zone. This is very high up. You're running out of oxygen. You do have, it is urgent. You can't spend an unlimited amount of time there. She says everyone was exhausted, especially Gabriel, who had been pulling and helping our son for so long. So, you can say as well, it's not like someone has stumbled in front of you like at ground level. You only have a certain amount of resources capable to sustain your own life, right? It's almost like trying to help someone underwater, but you've only got a certain amount of breath left in your body. In other words, there's your capacity is limited. So she says, luckily, Halung Dorchi Sherpa from 8K, I guess that's another expedition, came to help with the last meters to pull Muhammad up to a little snow shelf in the bottleneck. Gabriel gave his oxygen to Muhammad again. He also gave him hot water and tried to warm his body as best he could. We don't know why, but our son wasn't wearing gloves. So Gabriel also tried to warm his hands. So you can see Muhammad is in a very serious situation. I don't want to say he's like a baby, but he is almost incapacitated. He's not wearing clothing, and so he's got to be fed, he's got to be kept warm, and you can see that obviously a lot is being done to help him. She goes on to say, for an hour or more, Gabriel stayed and tried to help. All he could do was to stay with him and talk to him. At some point, Gabriel had almost no oxygen left and realized that if he himself wanted to come home that day, he needed to fetch more oxygen. He had to go up in order to get one, as he knew his Sherpa had an extra bottle, but it was much higher up. In total, I think Gabriel spent almost 2.5 hours with our son in the bottleneck while people were passing by. I don't think people understood the gravity of what was happening with our son as they were climbing, and that is why we see they are stepping over him to reach safely on the other side. And I don't want to take sides here, but I also think people maybe don't speak his language, so they don't necessarily know how he is. Also, it's not just a case of just saying, hey, how are you doing? It's difficult to speak, to breathe at that altitude. On the other hand, I suppose, is there anything wrong with stooping down, putting your hand on a guy's shoulder and saying, you okay? Most people understand that. How many people did that? How many people didn't do that? Couldn't each person have just offered something small, like a biscuit or, I don't know, couldn't each, if each person did try to contribute, because I think they said as many as 70 people stepped over him. Anyway, she goes on to say, Gabriel stayed with them as long as he could before he had to leave to get more oxygen for his own safety. This was very, very traumatic for everyone involved, and I can only imagine the physical and mental strength it took for Gabriel to do something so heroic and kind. And so I guess when this one person left Muhammad, that was when, he probably died after that, I'm guessing. Let's see what happens. So we're at the bottom of page 4. She says, Ming Temba, Makpa, Lama, Nima and myself were still climbing up, and we didn't know what had happened behind us, but we saw people catching up. We heard that Hassan was getting all the help he could. Very soon after we reached the summit, Gabriel joined us. I asked him if they got Hassan up, and he had said yes. I asked if he was alive, and Gabriel said that he was, but that he was in a very difficult situation. We understood that he might not make it down. It was heartbreaking. Now, what I've got to say here is there's no mention here that they were listening to radios or that they were radioing his condition, and that, to me, is perhaps, that seemed a little bit strange. We're going to deal with what she says at the summit and that context in a moment. Let's deal with the final page. So she says, it was only when we came back down that we saw that our son had passed, and we were ourselves in no shape to carry his body down. Now, again, I've got to say, did nobody that was passing him realize that he wasn't moving and radio anybody else? Because that was also a possibility. She says, you need 6 people to carry a person down, especially in dangerous areas. However, the bottleneck is so narrow that you can only fit one person in front and one behind the person being helped. In this case, it was impossible to safely carry our son down. Well, I agree with that part. Back in base camp, we heard that people thought no one had helped him, but we had. We had done our best, especially Gabriel. It is truly tragic what happened, and I feel very strongly for the family. If anything, I hope we can learn something from this tragedy. Everyone that goes up a summit needs proper training, proper equipment, and proper guidance. From what I understood, our son was not properly equipped to take on an 8,000-meter summit. What happened is in no way his fault, but it shows the importance of taking all of the possible precautions so that we can help ourselves and others. I think what she's talking about there is, to some extent, when you're climbing a serious mountain like K2, you've got to take personal responsibility. You've got to be well prepared. Of course, accidents can happen to anyone. Anyway, she says, she finishes off by saying, and please, please, please be kind, not just to those who went up to K2 that day and have all lived through something very difficult, but most importantly to Hassan's memory and those close to him. Be respectful. And then she talks about a GoFundMe. And she ends up by saying, thank you for reading this story. Now I'm going to play you the audio, and I'm going to end off with this, of Kristin at the top of K2 talking about the situation they're in.
From the summit of K2 in Pakistan on the 27th of July at 10:45, we have reached the summit number 14, and we have completed all 14 8,000 meter peak in 3 months and 1 day. We are very happy to be here, and I would never have made it without this guy here.
Oh, last
one. K2. Hey. And we are very, very happy that we could share this record and all the 14 mountains together in just 3 months and 1 day. And I want to say thank you to Lama and to Seven Summit and to all the other Sherpa that has been helping us in this project to make this possible. And I want to say thank you to all the sponsors that have made this possible, and to all the people that have been supporting us, and to my team home, and to my friends, and to my family, and of course to Jens, and everyone else that has been cheering on us and following us in this process, and we are very, very happy, and now we're going to climb down.
So what do you think about that? I do think a large part of what is upsetting people is when she was on the summit during this victory speech. This is a hero moment. She thanked and acknowledged a lot of people, including her sponsors. She's all smiles, but doesn't mention this climber in distress. And I think some people are critical of perhaps a lack of humanity in that respect. Is that fair or is that unfair? I will post a link to this Instagram where she's saying this, so you can watch it yourself, listen to it yourself. But this is a very good example of someone having their fairy tale while someone is literally going through a nightmare. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.